Welcome back to High Gain Guitar Academy. My name is Neil, and today I'm going to talk about expression techniques. How to express yourself with a little bit more emotion, a little more human feeling in your playing rather than just being very stiff. For example, let's start out by talking about sliding. Now, sliding is a technique where we will kind of slide our finger to another fret instead of just placing a finger on the other fret. So let's say I wanted to go from the 3rd fret of the G to the 5 of the G. I could play that note and then use another finger on the 5. But what if I just slid my pointer finger from the 3 to the 5? I'm going to pick the string. That's a lot more interesting. Kind of has a really different feel, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how to do that now. Sliding is tricky because you have to have enough pressure on the string to hold the note, but you want to hold it lightly enough to where you can still pull your finger moving around the neck. I've used this reference in another video, but you want to use the right amount of pressure that I call the Goldilocks pressure, okay? Now, Goldilocks, what did she want? She wanted it to be just right. If you push down too hard, well, that's too hard. If you don't press down hard enough, well, that's not hard enough. It's got to be just right. For example, we're going to press our pointer finger on the 3rd fret of the G string. Now, to slide to the 5th fret, you might think that you're going to push your finger there. But that's not the way. It's about pulling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the weight of my hand and arm, but mostly I like to think of my hand as if someone is grabbing it and pulling it towards the fret I want to go to. So if I want to go 3 to 5, I'm going to act as if someone is pulling my finger there from the 3. Pushing it is like pushing a boulder uphill. It's going to be really tough to do. So pulling it is the way. Now that's a pretty short slide. Sometimes we might be sliding up really high or really low from one point. So let's try this. Let's go from 3 all the way up to 15. That's a whole octave. That's a pretty big slide. Again, acting as if someone is pulling from my wrist, from the lower part of my hand up to that fret. And when I slide back, same thing. Someone pulling from the other way to get back to where I'm going. You may find yourself having trouble stopping on the note you're sliding to. I've got a trick for that. Act as if you are shooting at a moving target. Let's say the target, something is flying through the air, and you wanted to shoot that target. You don't follow it. You don't shoot at where the target is. You aim at where it's going. Okay, so you have to kind of get ahead of it. So if I shoot at where the target is going, they're going to meet there. The reason I'm using that analogy is because your eyes are going to be looking at where the target is going. Okay, so if the goal is to get from 3 to 15, once I've picked the 3 and I start sliding, I'm going to look directly at the 15. It's going to help me to stop there. Same thing going back the other way. If I'm sliding down a 3, I'm going to look at the 3. So you always want to aim with your eyes at where you're going. Which really allows you to slide up, down, easily as long as you keep shifting your focus to the destination fret. It seems a little weird. I don't know if you would actually do that in a song, but you get the idea. Now, sliding doesn't have to be done with your pointer finger. It can be done with any of your fingers, depending on the context of the song. It doesn't have to be done quickly. It can be a slow slide. You're going to hear the frets more when you do that, because you're going over every speed bump, as it were, a little bit more slowly. Obviously, the quicker you slide, the less of that you'll hear. So there's that. You'll, again, use that in the context of whatever it is you're playing, but slides are a great expression technique. Okay, the next technique we're going to use is hammer-ons and pull-offs. Now, this is one you've probably heard of before. Hammer-on and pull-off, they're kind of mirror images of each other, okay? Now, a hammer-on is where I'm going to pick a note and then hammer my finger onto a fret. as hard as I can. And it's going to be hard to do at first because we don't have a lot of muscles are closing really hard and fast initially. Your hands will get stronger. They'll get more used to this technique, but let's try this. I'm gonna pick the little E string, okay? And I'm gonna try to hammer on using my pointer or middle or ring. It really doesn't matter, whichever finger you feel strongest and most confident with. Try hammering on, let's say, the 3rd fret. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick the open E string and then hammer. Pick the open E string and then hammer. So I place my finger on the string pretty hard. Don't gradually place it on there. You want to slap it on there like that. But that's your finger on the guitar neck. It's going to be a little tough at first to get that kind of volume out of it. With practice, it does improve. Starting on the little strings, move to the big strings. It's a good idea to practice this on all the strings, the big ones, the small ones, because they all feel a bit different. And whichever ones you're getting more volume out of, that you're having more success with, practice the technique on that string, on those strings more at first until you get a little bit better at it, and then spread out into the rest of the strings. But that's the basic technique. It doesn't have to be done with any finger in particular. You can do it with any of them. I like the middle finger a lot of the time, but as we're playing songs, yeah, it's gonna be the pinky, it's gonna be the ring, it's gonna be all of them. But just for the sake of learning how to do it, maybe start with your pointer or middle. Just a basic hammer-on, okay? Pick a string and pick a fret. Now the opposite of the hammer-on is the pull-off. Pull-offs are quite a bit easier. Let's just do the mirror image of what we were just practicing. I'm going to hold the 3 of the little E string, pick the note, and then let go to open. Pulling off, it is what it sounds like, pull off. Now, the key ingredient to this dish is the actual pull off, okay? A lot of people, when they try this, they'll just pick the string and lift straight up. And see, the pull off note isn't very loud because I'm just letting go. What you actually want to do is use gravity. Gravity's gonna be our friend here. I'm actually gonna slightly pull off, flicking the string as I let go of it, okay? It's gonna kind of pick the string again from your fret hand. See, I'm letting gravity do its thing. I'm kind of pulling off in a direction that will pluck the string. I can do it on the middle strings too. Now what you might do, because you notice there a couple times, it hits the other strings. So what you might do is with your picking hand, if I'm using the G string, for example, I might use one of my other fingers to kind of mute the strings below that. Like I'm gonna hold the B string still. So when I pull off of the G, nothing happens to the B because I'm holding it still with my ring finger. That's something you don't really see in a lot of guitar videos, and that's why you're here to learn from me, is because I'm going to show you those things that they don't typically show you that are super useful in an actual playing situation, okay? When you want clean notes, sometimes you have to mute the other strings. So yeah, sticking a finger while I'm holding the pick with my pointer and thumb, I'm going to use like maybe my ring finger to stop the string below the one I'm pulling off of. There's an example of using the hammer-ons and pull-offs together. Hammer-on, then pull-off. And if you give the pull-offs a good flick to get the momentum of the string going again, the volume, you can start doing hammer-ons and pull-offs consecutively back to back. So that's a quick lesson on hammer-ons and pull-offs. Super useful, do them anywhere on the neck. Keep in mind, we did an example where you're like doing from an open fret. You could do it from a fretted note too. Let's say I'm on the 5 of the G. Just keep holding that, pick it, and let's say I want to hammer on the 7. Gonna use my ring finger, you could use your pinky, it doesn't really matter. Just keep holding the fretted note. And then same thing for the pull-off. I'm gonna pull off to the fretted note. Okay guys, the next bit is bending. Bending is a super useful tool because much like sliding, it's a smoother way to get from note to note. You don't have to just fret the notes. With a slide, it's a little smoother. With a bend, very smooth. Now the trick with bending is you're pushing the string, you're either pushing it up or you're pulling it down. For the middle strings, you can go either way. Obviously on the little string, if I pull down, I fall off the fretboard, so your only option is to push up. The opposite would be said of the big strings. If I'm on the big E, I'm gonna have to pull down to bend, because if I push up, I fall off. Let's use the G string as an example because it's kind of in the middle of the strings. I'm going to hold it with my middle finger. You may use pointer, middle, ring, it doesn't really matter, whatever finger's comfortable to you. I feel like most of the time bends are done with middle or ring, occasionally pointer, not very often with the pinky, but for the sake of this exercise, I'm going to use my middle finger. The idea is you want to bend up just the right amount to get to the note you're trying to reach. When you're not just placing your finger on a fret, you don't really quite know where you're going to end up. So you really have to use your ears and the feel of the string. So I just bent a full step. That's 2 frets higher. So getting it, exact dead on, it just takes a little practice. Now that's bending, pushing the string up. Now notice when I do that, I'm also going to place another finger behind the one I'm bending with. So if I'm bending with my middle finger, I'm going to place my pointer finger on the fret behind it because the only fret you hear is the highest one that you're holding. Anything back here, you don't hear. It's all whatever's, first in line. Just keep that in mind. It's always easier to bend a string with 2 fingers than 1 because let's say you're pushing a boulder over a hill. If you have a friend doing it with you, it's going to be a lot easier, right? So that's an example of pushing up on the string. There's also, pulling down would be the opposite, and that's totally acceptable as well. You can do it high, low on any string. It doesn't really matter. Bending, just, get used to finding how far or how little to bend to get to the note you want to get to. Now there's also a cool trick called pre-bending. Pre-bending is a little bit more of an intermediate or advanced technique where you start out bent before you pick the string. So I'm going to start out bending the string before I even pick it and then bring it down. Pre-bends are a lot of fun. You can get a lot of cool sounds out of that. Moving on, another great expression technique is vibrato. Now this is kind of where you're able to mimic the human voice pretty strongly, and I think there are guitar players out there that do a great job of imitating the way a singer would sing. So vibrato is basically a series of small bends to a rhythm generally. So let's say I grab the 7 of the G. Now vibrato, like I said, it's just a series of small bends. In this case, I'm pulling down and letting the string bring itself back to center. You don't have to push it both ways. You can just pull one way and let it get itself back to center. I can push up and come back to center, or I can pull down. It doesn't really matter if you're in the middle strings. On the outside strings, I'm gonna fall off if I do that. So keep that in mind. But again, if I'm on the 7 of the G, for example, just small bends, and then let it come back to center. It's almost like you're not even changing notes. It's just a warbling of that note. Unless you do a really extreme vibrato, like that, which there's a time and place for that, absolutely. But most of the time, just a slight bending of the note is a vibrato. You might have a different technique. I've seen guitarists do more of a circular motion. I typically will just do the down and up. And I also like to wedge the in between of my pointer and thumb kind of on the guitar neck to give myself sort of a brace. It kind of holds me in place while I wiggle back and forth. The vibrato isn't so much coming from my fingers, it's more coming from the shaking of my entire hand while I'm bracing it against the guitar neck. That's the technique I use. Now you can do it fast, you can do it slow. Here's a fast or a slow. It really just depends on the song you're playing. Whatever feels right for the song. You're not stuck to any rules here. Just, give it a little bit of feeling as if you were singing, That's the goal with a vibrato. These are all really good techniques, guys. And again, I think most of these lend themselves to making your guitar sing. When people say, oh, he can make it sing, I feel like these are the techniques that get you there. These expressions, these ways of making your guitar sound more human. Now, the last thing I'm going to leave you with, it's called the pick scrape. When you have your distortion on, you take the side of your pick, stick it on the big strings. Notice the big strings on your electric guitar are coiled. The small ones aren't, but the big ones are coiled, so when you run a solid object down the side of those, you're going to get a really cool scraping sound. And if you do it really fast, it sounds super rock and roll. So sometimes I like to do a pick scrape, and at the very end here, pick a power chord at the very end. Just slide all the way down to here, scrape all the way down, and then pick here just like you would pick down here. Even if you don't know how to play anything else, that's pretty impressive. Your friends will think you're cool, and your parents will probably get annoyed because you've done it 10 million times. Anyway, there you go, guys. Those are expression techniques. Hopefully they make your guitar sound like it's singing. That is the goal. Take it, learn it, love it, use it, and I will see you next time.